because you're a cisgender man, obviously you think about the Roman Empire all the time, right?
When that came up, I found it hilarious because the reason why I think about the Roman Empire was because my degree was in classical antiquity. It has nothing to do with like a masculine urge to conquer a continent or the basin of the Mediterranean. But so when that trend came up, I was like, what parts of the Roman Empire are you actually thinking about?
The way it's being portrayed today says more about our society and its fantasies, its dreams, its aspirations than it says about really what was happening in the Roman Empire. And I think it's now a stand-in for whiteness and white supremacy.
When it comes to the representation of Rome in media, we have a vision of Rome in which everyone in the upper classes was white.
Obviously, they don't think about the fact that if we were to apply the racial construct of today onto the Roman Empire, then you would find that it's a multiracial, multi-ethnic society, but they don't want to talk about that, of course.
Because we only see the parts of the Roman Empire that we want to see. One of the things that is really fascinating about the Roman Empire, and that could be considered a benefit of the fall of the Roman Empire, is the end of large scale slave trade. Because
Hmm.
Roman society lived off slavery. It was addicted to slavery in such a scale that it actually hampered technological development. For instance, when it comes to agriculture, the Romans had the technology to improve the tools that they used. They had the principles that would allow them to build the technology to make working in fields easier. But they didn't do that because you did not want to diminish the number of slaves that you used for work because you didn't have an
Right.
incentive to be able to do that. So there was a consistent resistance to the introduction of new technologies because of the vast amounts of slaves and the structure of slavery that buttressed the Roman Empire. During the medieval period, that was considered by and large the Dark Ages, all of these techniques, when it comes to mining, when it comes to agriculture, even when it comes to industry, developed because they had less
Mhm.
people to be able to do it.
To summarize what you're saying that the over-reliance on exploitative labor in the form of slavery was actually hampering technological development, actually slowing down and preventing development, which is a very interesting lesson for today's society, right? But what is even more interesting is that we don't see it that way, or at least it's not being presented to us that way. For someone who was living through that period that we consider as the fall of empire, someone who was enslaved during the empire, suddenly the structure that was maintaining him enslaved falling apart, maybe that was a positive.
We look at the past and we project ourselves on it,
Mhm, of course.
especially if we consider that that past is glorious. If we want to reclaim a connection to that particular
Making something
past,
great again.
yes,
To bring us back to the topic of my video essay, which is divesting from empire, what would it have been for someone existing in the Roman Empire? Because we are, right now, I think we can all agree, we are going through something that feels and looks like the fall of a civilization, the undoing of all of the structures that we were supposed to rely on, whether we liked them or not, whether they worked or not. They seem to be falling apart. So, of course, it feels like something people who would have lived in Rome, in the Roman Empire, would have felt when Rome fell and when the Roman Empire fell. But the question is, would it have felt that way for them as the fall of something? Or could it have been actually just the next chapter, just a massive change that could have actually been good for them?
one thing that I think that we have in common is that things are not going to be spectacular. Like when we think about the fall of the Roman Empire, we think of the sack of the city of Rome. But after the city was sacked by the Vandals, the Roman Empire still lasted for like 100 and something years.
Right.
What happened was an expression that I just love. It's called enshittification. So enshittification, to define the loss of quality of things like
Social
Facebook,
media.
social media,
Yes.
TikTok, and so on and so forth, how things gradually get suckier and suckier and suckier until the point that they look nothing like they did at the starting point. And
Hmm.
that's what happened to the Roman Empire. Sometimes there would be a dramatic event in which you'd have to, for instance, leave your house and move to a neighbor's house and so on and so forth. And it could be permanent and it could be impermanent. But you started noticing things like the roads weren't fixed properly. The infrastructure that allowed you to live the life that the Romans aspired to live and that they sold you as your kind of birthright. You sign up to us and you are entitled to have, like a city in which you have aqueducts that bring you water. You're entitled to go to the baths. You're entitled to travel safely across the roads. All of these things start eroding slowly. If you were a citizen of the Roman Empire at this moment, as if you are a citizen here in the times in which we live in Western countries, you just start noticing that things are getting shittier. And it's in the background. So there isn't unless there is an explosive event that drives you away from your home, for instance, like the genocide in Gaza or in the Congo, there are absolutely catastrophic events. For the vast majority of us citizens who live in the core of the empire, we're just going to start noticing things getting shittier. But you adjust because that's what we do elastically as humans. We adjust to the shittiness because, like we need to continue to live our lives. So you start seeing infrastructure breakdown. You start seeing that you can't get the same products that you used to get in the shops. You start seeing the things that connection with other people from other countries is starting to get harder.
This whole conversation, or most of it, will be posted on my Patreon and maybe yours.
Yes.
Do you want to say what your Patreon is as well?
My Patreon is Jupiter Ball, and potentially this is going to be my first post in my Patreon as well. So yeah, a first for both of us.
Well, it's going to be both of our firsts are both first, whatever.
Yeah.
Me not speak English.